welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're tearing down some of the biggest narratives in crypto. We're going to look past the hype, block out the internet noise, and rigorously test the core foundations holding up Bitcoin. Let's get right into it.
So here's the trillion-dollar question. Literally, if we actually ignore the viral stories about digital gold or inflation hedges and just look at the raw data, what exactly is holding up this massive industry? If Bitcoin struggles to function as an actual currency, what's genuinely driving its value?
And look, finding the answer to this actually matters. Bitcoin isn't just another random token, right? It's the foundational building block of an industry that recently watched over $1 trillion evaporate in a massive market downturn. So understanding Bitcoin is absolutely crucial, because it's basically the bottom block in a highly fragile Jenga tower.
To really evaluate Bitcoin today, we have to rewind to its origins. When Satoshi Nakamoto dropped the 2008 white paper, the intention was crystal clear. It was explicitly designed as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The whole point was decentralized digital money, direct payments, no banks, no middlemen.
So, the big question, did it succeed in becoming functional money? To answer that objectively, we're going to test this original hypothesis against 3 standard economic criteria. These are the fundamental tests economists use to define actual money.
All right, test 1, medium of exchange.
Does Bitcoin actually work well for everyday payments? Well, the transaction speeds give us a pretty stark reality check. The Bitcoin network processes roughly 500,000 transactions per day, which, sounds like a lot, but let's put that into perspective. Visa processes roughly 65,000 transactions every single second. Think about that. Visa clears Bitcoin's entire daily volume in under 8 seconds.
And it's not just slow, it's staggeringly inefficient. A single individual Bitcoin transaction uses about the same amount of electricity that your average American household consumes in 43 days. That means its carbon footprint is equivalent to 1.5 million Visa swipes. It's pretty easy to see why it struggles as an everyday payment system, right?
Moving on to test 2, store of value.
Can you reliably hold it today and spend it later without losing your purchasing power? Our analysis highlights 3 massive hurdles here. First, historically, it's highly volatile. We're talking frequent 20% price swings in a single month. Because of that extreme volatility, it's treated way more like speculative gambling than reliable savings. Throw in heavily concentrated ownership and it becomes super vulnerable to market manipulation.
Actually, let's talk about that ownership breakdown, because it's fascinating. Despite the pervasive internet narrative that Bitcoin is completely decentralized, actual on-chain data reveals the exact opposite. According to this source, just 2% of addresses control an astonishing 95% of the total supply. It is incredibly top-heavy.
And this top-heavy structure brings real systemic risks. Take the Jane Street incident, for example. They faced massive legal scrutiny for allegedly helping to trigger the 2022 crypto winter, a crash that completely wiped out $40 billion in value. When a tiny group of whales can swing the market to that degree, it completely undermines the whole idea of a stable, secure store of value.
Which brings us to test 3, unit of account.
Does Bitcoin serve as a standard measure to price goods? Like, is it a reliable unit of account? The source argues, absolutely not. Even the businesses that actively champion and accept it don't actually price their items in it. They price everything in US dollars and then simply convert that dollar amount into Bitcoin right at checkout. So it's not an economic measurement at all. It's literally just a temporary pass-through vehicle.
Okay, let's look at a real-world field test, the El Salvador experiment. A really common defense is that Bitcoin just hasn't been given a fair shot yet. But we actually have seen a real-world, large-scale field test. In 2021, El Salvador went completely all in. They made it legal tender, launched a national wallet called Chivo, mandated that businesses accept it, and even handed every single citizen $30 in free Bitcoin just to try it out. This was the ultimate real-world stress test.
So what actually happened? Well, remittances, sending money home from abroad, that was touted as Bitcoin's big killer use case. Yet, according to IMF data, traditional financial systems still handled 98% of El Salvador's remittances. Less than 2% of people actually used Bitcoin for cross-border transfers. That data pretty much entirely debunks the utility narrative.
And what about that national Chivo wallet itself? Well, data from the National Bureau of Economic Research is pretty stark. 60% of users downloaded the wallet, cashed out their $30 government incentive, and literally never made a single transaction on the app ever again.
They basically took the free cash and walked away.
Fast forward to today, and public sentiment in El Salvador is largely negative. Reports show 66% of the population considers the national Bitcoin adoption an outright failure, and 77% firmly oppose using any more public funds to support it. The massive real-world experiment just didn't succeed in creating functional money.
Which brings us to our final section, the underlying driver of value. This is where things get really fascinating. If Bitcoin falls short on all three fundamental tests of money and completely underperformed in a nationwide real-world rollout, what on earth is driving its massive price? The source points to a classic economic concept, the greater fool theory. This theory basically states that an asset's price isn't justified by its underlying value. It doesn't produce goods, it has no cash flows. Instead, the value is justified purely by the belief that a greater fool will willingly buy it from you later for an even higher price.
And this cycle relies entirely on those marketing narratives we hear every single day, that it's digital gold or the ultimate inflation hedge. Those stories are specifically crafted to create belief. Belief creates demand, demand drives up the price, and those higher prices are broadcasted everywhere to attract brand new buyers. Every single narrative serves one specific purpose: attracting fresh capital into the machine.
The uncomfortable reality presented by the data is that the moment new buyers stop entering, the whole cycle breaks. Its value relies entirely on the hope that someone else will pay more tomorrow. So, I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought. When the narratives eventually fade and the supply of new buyers inevitably runs out, who will be the final greater fool? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the data.